My name is Larissa, I'm 26 years old, a staff sergeant in the U.S. Army, my voice steadying despite the knot in my chest. The echo of 160 booted feet hitting the ground sent a familiar shiver down my spine, but this time, it was laced with anxiety rather than pride. As I stood there in my crisp Army uniform, the weight of my newly pinned staff sergeant stripes felt heavier than ever. I blinked back the sting in my eyes, trying to ignore the way my stepmother scoffed from the back of the room, arms crossed and an unimpressed frown painted across her face. "You think that title means something?" she had sneered earlier. My heart raced, and the air felt thick in my chest. This was supposed to be my moment, a celebration of a hard-fought promotion, but all I could focus on was how her derisive words hung over me like a dark cloud. As I stood before my fellow soldiers at the ceremony, their faces seemed to blur into one collective blur of camaraderie and respect, but all I could see was her. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to focus on the men and women around me, their expressions filled with admiration and pride. They had seen the long nights and the grind it took to earn this rank. Yet, the thought that my stepmother, of all people, couldn't see my worth, gnawed at my confidence like a hungry wolf. I inhaled deeply, but it did little to quell the tightening sensation in my chest. I reminded myself that I was Larissa, 26 years old, and a staff sergeant in the U.S. Army. I had fought hard for this recognition. For honor. The bold declaration erupted in unison, and I felt a tremor of power surge through me as each of the 160 Army captains rose to their feet, saluting not just me, but the dedication and sacrifice we all shared. My hands shook slightly, and I forced them to still against my sides, the polished fabric of my uniform comforting in its familiarity. This was the moment I had been waiting for, a culmination of years of effort and resilience. But even as they hailed me, a whisper of doubt lingered. Would my stepmother ever acknowledge what I had accomplished? Or would I remain forever invisible in her eyes? Amidst the ceremony's grandeur, I could hear the quiet murmurs of my peers applauding my promotion, their faces bright with encouragement. Still, the sting of my stepmother's disdain gnawed at me, a relentless reminder of childhood insecurities I thought I had buried. Did she truly believe I was unworthy? The tension coiled tighter, a serpent around my chest, as I forced a smile and accepted the praise. In that moment, I felt like I was wearing a mask, trying to project confidence while grappling with the ache of not being fully seen. Yet, as I returned the salute, the weight of my stepmother's words began to dissipate. I realized that this moment was not just for her, it was for me and for everyone who had walked this path alongside me. The military had taught me that honor was not merely a title but a testament to the sacrifices made for something greater than myself. I breathed in deeply, feeling my chest expand with pride, and for the first time, I felt an unwavering resolve settle in. I would continue to prove my worth not just to my stepmother, but to myself. Before I go on, subscribe to the channel. Here, we tell the untold stories of military women, courage, sacrifice, and truth. Your support helps more voices like mine be heard. The day had arrived, and as I stood backstage, my heart raced with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. I had fought for every inch of my place in this moment, earning the title of Staff Sergeant through long nights and relentless drills. The air was thick with the scent of fresh paint, freshly polished boots, and the unshakable tension that precedes something monumental. I could hear the muffled sounds of my fellow soldiers through the thick curtains, the clatter of chairs and the low hum of chatter, and with each passing second, it felt more surreal. Today wasn't just another training exercise or a routine briefing. It was about to be a turning point in my career. Then she walked in, my stepmom, Becca, arms crossed and a smirk plastered on her face. I had invited her, hoping she'd take pride in this moment, but that was my first mistake. She had always been the type to throw shade, her barbs veiled in sarcasm. "Look at you, a sergeant now. I hope they don't regret that decision," she joked, and I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. The laughter of the other guests didn't help. They were kind enough not to look my way, but their presence felt overwhelming. It was as if Becca's words had echoed through the entire hall, vibrating in the space between us. I wanted to shrivel up, but I clenched my fists, reminding myself that I had earned this. I was not just a title, I was a soldier. As the ceremony began, I took a deep breath, focusing on the general flipping through his notes. I wasn't there for Becca's approval, I was doing this for myself and my brothers and sisters in arms. Each person who stood before me in their uniforms represented my journey, the struggles, the victories, and the sacrifices made. When my name was finally called, I felt my pulse quicken. The applause was deafening as I walked to the front, my boots echoing against the polished floor. I maintained my composure, but inside, the need to prove myself surged like a tide. I wanted them all to see me, not as someone who had a stepmom throwing shade but as a warrior ready to lead. When the time came for the official salute, I felt a surge of pride. As I stood in front of my fellow soldiers, the weight of their gazes felt like a cloak of honor. I could see the respect in their eyes, and for a moment, the laughter of my stepmom faded into the background. I raised my hand to salute, and in unison, 160 army captains stood tall, faces serious and resolute. For honor, they roared, their voices booming across the hall with a singular purpose. My heart swelled, this was everything I had fought for. This was more than just a ceremony, it was a testament to all the hours I had put into this life, to every early morning and every late night packing gear, every tear shed and every laugh shared with my comrades. As I stood there, surrounded by pride and camaraderie, Becca's disbelief became a distant echo. This was my moment, and all her mockery didn't stand a chance against the solidarity I felt among my fellow soldiers. I realized in that instant that my identity was not defined by her words but by the collective spirit of those who stood beside me. I was Larissa, a staff sergeant in the U.S. Army, and I was home. I felt as if I had finally carved out my place in the world, and no one could take that from me, not even her. The air was thick with a blend of formal pride and casual camaraderie as I stood in front of my fellow soldiers, the weight of the moment settling on my shoulders. The promotion ceremony had a rhythm all its own, a blend of speeches and traditions that resonated deep within me. Yet, as I felt the weight of my new rank's insignia against the fabric of my uniform, a shiver ran down my spine, igniting an ancient flicker of doubt. My heart raced not just from the pride of my accomplishment but from the primal fear that I'd felt for as long as I could remember, fear of not being enough. It was the kind of fear that spiraled in, often uninvited, and took hold at the most inconvenient times. Every nervous glance toward the back of the gathering triggered memories I thought I had buried. I saw her there, mingling with the crowd, a sharp smile resting on her lips, a reminder of the woman I had long battled for recognition. My stepmom, always ready with a sarcastic quip, would have relished being the center of attention. I could imagine her voice, dripping with disdain as she scoffed at my uniform. So, Staff Sergeant. What's next, a promotion to your daydreams? I fought against the swell of anger that threatened to bubble over. In that moment, I wanted to step back and shrink, but I had learned long ago that folding under the pressure was not an option. As the ceremony progressed, I couldn't shake off the way she had made me feel so small, even on days that should have been mine. I remembered the awkward family dinners where success was never celebrated unless it came attached with an undeniable level of approval from her. Every academic award I received, every inch I climbed in my career, was measured against her barometer of achievement, one I could never quite meet. I was aware that my choice to enlist had surprised her, and she would have much preferred the prestige that came with more traditional pathways. For years, I had fought to prove myself, not just to her but to everyone who had ever questioned my worth, my decisions, my dreams. Yet, as I locked eyes with my peers, some who had seen the worst of warfare and had survived, others who had become my family through shared sacrifice, I felt a rush of solidarity. There was a tangible bond among us, something deeper than the camaraderie of shared experiences. When the commanding officer called for the salute to my new rank, the crisp sound of 160 boots hitting the ground resonated through the air. For honor, they shouted, the commanding voice a balm to my racing thoughts. The camaraderie eclipsed my doubts. I was not just a rank or a name, but part of a legacy that transcended personal strife. For a moment, It didn't matter if she was there or if her words echoed in the back of my mind. There, in that moment, I discovered my place, not as a stepdaughter fighting for validation but as a soldier standing tall, surrounded by those who recognized the blood, sweat, and tears that went into earning a title that meant honor, duty, and sacrifice. The past began to fade as the present filled my lungs with breath, igniting a fire deep within me. There would always be battles to fight, internal and external, but today I was ready, and I didn't need her approval to know just how far I'd come. I often find myself staring at the medals on my wall, each one a reminder of the sweat, tears, and sacrifices that have led me to where I am today. But as I trace the edges of my most recent achievement, I can't help but be transported back to my childhood, to the way my family dynamics molded me, both positively and negatively. The year I turned 15 was a turning point, as everything I thought I knew about loyalty and love crumbled in the face of familial expectations. My father had always been my rock, the unwavering support in my life. Yet, my stepmother's arrival turned everything upside down. The day she moved in felt like the last breath before a storm. I remember watching with a mix of resentment and curiosity as she unpacked her boxes, her laughter filling the silent corners of our home. I wanted to believe she was there to nurture a family, but I quickly learned that she was more interested in molding us than truly loving us. I had surrendered my room to her daughter without complaint, hoping that this would foster a sense of togetherness. Instead, I felt like a stranger in my own home, an outsider in a family that would never include me. When I shared my dreams of joining the army one day, her scoff echoed in the air, a sound I'd grown all too familiar with. "Maybe you should stick to more ladylike pursuits," she'd said, her tone dripping with condescension. High school became an escape for me, a place where I could breathe without the weight of her judgment. I found camaraderie among classmates who shared my aspirations. Slowly, I began to embrace the strength that I had buried beneath layers of self-doubt. But even as I trained harder, pushing myself through ROTC drills, her voice lurked in my mind, "You'll never amount to anything." I took those words, twisted them into fuel, and became determined to prove her wrong. I wanted to show her that this was my life, that I was not just my father's daughter, but a force to be reckoned with in my own right. After my acceptance into the army, I felt a surge of accomplishment. I had left behind a world that had mocked my ambitions and embraced a new family where honor and discipline reigned supreme. Still, the scars from my past ran deep. There were times when I'd catch myself looking for validation in the eyes of those who had belittled me, searching for acknowledgement that I had proved them wrong. I thought of my stepmother's face the day my father emailed her the news. I imagined the disbelief that washed over her when she realized that I achieved something so great. But there was also a sliver of doubt that clung to me. Would she still see me as the girl she bullied or as the woman I had become? On the day of my promotion, standing there in uniform with the crisp collar and polished boots, I felt the weight of that history pressing down on me. When my stepmother walked in, her expression was a mix of feigned surprise and contempt. I could hear her mocking laugh echoing in my mind, and my heart sank momentarily. But just as she opened her mouth to undermine my moment, I was surrounded by my fellow soldiers, 160 army captains all standing tall, saluting me as I was called to the front. "For honor," they shouted in unison. The sound filled the air, drowning out everything else, especially her derisive tone. In that moment, I realized that the person I had fought to become was finally being recognized, not just by them, but by me. The days leading up to my promotion felt like a blur of uncertainty wrapped in determination. I spent countless hours in front of the mirror, practicing my salute, trying to perfect the way I held myself. I knew I was good at my job, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I still had something to prove, both to myself and to everyone else who doubted me since I enlisted. The voices in my head echoed loudly, "You don't belong here," and "You're just a girl." My stepmom had been particularly merciless, mocking my ambition as if it were a joke. It stung, but each jab only fueled my drive to show her, and everyone else, exactly what I was capable of. As the day of the ceremony approached, the nerves bubbled up inside me. I had rehearsed my speech 1,000 times, hoping to strike the right balance between humility and pride. I wanted to convey that this promotion wasn't just a personal victory, it was a testament to all the hard work and sacrifices I'd made. As I walked into the venue, the sight of the flags and the bright uniforms made my heart race. It was real. I was really stepping into a role that came with expectations and responsibilities. I glanced at the faces around me, some familiar, others strangers, but all were part of the fabric of my army family. When the time came for me to stand before my peers, I felt a rush of emotion. I took a breath and started my speech, pouring everything I had into those words. I acknowledged the mentorship I'd received and recognized the support from my team. I spoke about the challenges we faced together, the long nights and early mornings, how we pushed each other to be better. But right at that moment, when I finished my speech, I caught sight of her, my stepmom, inches away from the stage, her eyes rolling in disbelief. I fought to keep my composure, but that spark of mockery cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Then suddenly, as if drawn by some invisible force, the room erupted. One by one, the army captains rose, standing tall and saluting me. The sound of "For Honor" rang out, echoing through the hall like a thunderclap. I stood frozen for a moment, disbelief washing over me. It was a wave of validation that I desperately needed. In that instant, the doubts began to fade, replaced by a sense of belonging I hadn't anticipated. The captains proved that my worth wasn't determined by my gender, or the sneers of family, but by my commitment and the respect I'd cultivated within these walls. As the ceremony concluded and I stood there, still enveloped in the cheers and applause, I realized how far I'd come. It wasn't just about proving something to my stepmom, it was about carving my own path in a world that constantly tried to sideline me. I felt the weight of my accomplishments heavy on my shoulders, yet it was a welcome burden. I was Larissa, a staff sergeant in the U.S. Army, and I had earned my place here. In that moment, I wasn't just a soldier, I was a leader, embodying strength and resilience. And maybe, just maybe, I could start believing in my worth as fiercely as my fellow soldiers did. I stood at the front of the room, the harsh fluorescent lights reflecting off my uniform. The air felt thick, almost electric, as I clutched the edges of the podium. My mother's laughter still echoed in my ears, mocking, dripping with disbelief. A staff sergeant? That's cute, Larissa, she had sneered during the family dinner, her tone dripping with condescension. I had expected her to be proud, at least a little. But instead, she treated my promotion like a punchline to a bad joke. I fought the urge to roll my eyes, knowing the importance of the moment. I was here for my squad, my soldiers. They deserved respect, and I needed to show them that I wasn't just worthy of my rank, I had earned it through sweat and determination. Surrounded by the faces of my peers, I could feel their eyes on me, their expectations heavy on my shoulders. I took a deep breath, centering myself. Each time I looked out into the crowd, my gaze landed on the younger soldiers I had mentored. I thought about the countless nights spent going through drills, the moments I'd stayed late to help them prepare for inspections. I wanted them to understand that hard work pays off. I wanted them to see a reflection of resilience when they looked at me. It wasn't just about climbing the ranks, it was about proving that women like me belonged in this space, that we could hold our heads high in a male-dominated environment. As I began to speak, my voice wavered at first, and I could sense my mother's laughter creeping into my mind again. But then I thought of all the struggles I had faced, lack of support, the long hours, the moments of self-doubt that threatened to consume me. I know, I said, my voice gaining strength, that some people don't believe in what we do. But each of you has shown me that our dedication and commitment matter. We fight not just for each other, but for the values that bind us together as soldiers. I watched as the faces in the crowd shifted, a mixture of pride and camaraderie filling the space. It was a welcome reminder that I wasn't alone, that there were others who had felt the sting of ridicule and had risen above it. And then it happened, like a wave crashing against the shore. A captain, someone I respected immensely, stood in the front row. One by one, others began to rise, their uniforms crisp, their expressions serious. "For honor," they shouted, the words ringing with a fierce loyalty that washed over me like a warm embrace. I felt the weight of their support and validation. It was more than just a chant, it was a declaration, a profound acknowledgement of not just my journey but the shared commitment we all had to our mission, to our country. In that moment, my stepmother's voice dulled to a whisper. What mattered most was the unity among us, the shared struggles we had faced in this line of work together. Looking out at them, I realized that I had overcome something far greater than my stepmother's dismissive words. I had shattered my own limitations and doubts. I was not just a staff sergeant, I was a leader, a mentor, and a part of something larger than myself. As they stood there in their crisp uniforms, saluting me, I felt my heart swell with pride. No longer would I allow anyone to make me question my worth. The journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but I was ready to lead, ready to fight, and ready to inspire. Because this was my moment, and I would own it with every fiber of my being. I remember the day I received my promotion, standing in the ceremonial hall surrounded by my peers, my heart racing with pride and a hint of trepidation. As the ceremony commenced, I scanned the crowd, searching for familiar faces. There was my dad, who had supported me through every grueling training session. And then, there was my stepmom. I had hoped for a glimmer of approval from her, but all I saw was a smirk, a knowing look that twisted something deep in my gut. It wasn't just my promotion she mocked, it was everything I had fought for. With every step I took to the podium, pulses of memories raced through my mind. I recalled the long nights studying, the countless hours spent at the range, and the moments where self-doubt crept in, threatening to derail my ambitions. I'd often wondered if my stepmom even understood the sacrifices I made. I had grown up in an environment where my achievements felt diminished, where my every success was weighed against some unrealistic standard. But this promotion was a beacon of validation, and I refused to let her scoff at my accomplishment. For honor, I reminded myself, replaying the mantra in my head as I recited my vows before my fellow soldiers. Each word echoed louder than the mockery that had stung me moments earlier. I was no longer just a stepdaughter or someone living in a shadow. I was a staff sergeant, a leader, and I'd earned every ounce of respect that accompanied that title. As I turned to face the assembled soldiers, I felt the weight of their presence. They had witnessed my journey, the struggles and small victories that came with navigating a male-dominated space. Together, we had each faced challenges, and as I looked out into the crowd, I caught the eyes of my fellow soldiers, who readily recognized the effort it took to reach this point. Then it happened, unexpectedly, almost like a wave breaking against the shore. One by one, they stood, their boots thudding against the floor as they saluted me. For honor, they called out in unison, and a rush of emotion filled my chest. This was my moment, the validation I had chased, not just from my stepmom but from the very people who knew the battles fought behind those promotion plaques. In that moment of collective respect, I realized how far I had come, not just in rank but as a person. Each soldier standing there had played a role in my growth, challenging me, pushing me to be better than I had ever thought I could be. I wasn't just an individual climbing the ranks, I was part of a tapestry woven from shared experiences, sweat, and resilience. The laughter I'd shared during late-night strategy discussions, the tears over mistakes made on the field, these were the threads that defined us. And standing tall, enveloped in that camaraderie, I cherished every sacrifice that had brought me to this stage. As the applause reverberated in the hall, a new understanding formed within me, a deep awareness that the judgments of my stepmom didn't define me. They were just echoes of a past I had outgrown. Standing there, honored by my fellow soldiers, I realized that my worth wasn't reliant on external validation, it emanated from my commitment to my mission and my growth as a leader. I had carved my own identity in an environment that often sought to diminish it. This moment was not an end but a cornerstone for what lay ahead. I was ready to embrace whatever challenges awaited me with the same tenacity that had brought me here. I couldn't shake the feeling as I sat in my cramped office, surrounded by the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the distant echoes of drill sergeants barking orders outside. The promotion ceremony a week before still stung, especially the way my stepmom had laughed when I shared the news over dinner. "What's next, Larissa? Making your bed? You might as well be a maid." Her words cut deep, especially coming from someone who should have been proud. But I knew she'd always seen me as a burden rather than an achiever. The distance between us had always felt like a chasm, but that night, it became a chasm filled with loss. I read through reports, but my mind wandered, fixating on the waves of disappointment that seemed to crash over me. The truth was, her mockery was just the latest in a series of losses I had faced. My father had passed away 2 years ago, and it was strange how his absence felt heavier with each day. He would have been there, proudly clasping my shoulder, assuring me that my achievements were worthy of respect. I missed the way he would insist on calling me my little warrior, his voice brimming with pride. I wondered if he would have laughed at my stepmother's comments or confronted her with a sharp retort. I prayed every day that I could find strength in his memory, but instead, I felt adrift in a sea of longing for a connection that no longer existed. The army had always been my refuge, a structured world where I could shed the weight of familial expectations and carve out my own identity. But on days like this, even the polished boots and sharp uniforms couldn't drown out the echoes of disapproval I had grown accustomed to. I stared at my promotion certificate hung on the wall, a reminder of how far I had come, yet it felt like a mere illusion. The moment I had earned my new rank should have felt triumphant, but instead, it felt overshadowed by my stepmom's belittling remarks. I struggled to find motivation in the very passion that had once fueled me. I didn't want to feel this way, but it was hard not to when the celebrations I craved were marred by ridicule. Then came the day I had to lead my battalion in a parade, my chest swelling with pride as I stood at the front, shoulders squared. I glanced at the men and women behind me, feeling the weight of responsibility, a bittersweet reminder of the unity we shared in our service, even if my family relationships felt fractured. The moment I commanded the troops to stand and salute, the air grew heavy with reverence. When I shouted, "For honor," I was taken aback by the thunderous response of 160 Army captains standing in formation, saluting me with a fierce pride that felt almost palpable. For that brief moment, I was enveloped in a wave of acceptance and belonging that I desperately sought elsewhere. Their collective respect washed over me, igniting a flicker of self-worth that I thought I had lost. I acknowledged their salute, my heart swelling with gratitude, a sharp contrast to my stepmom's harsh laughter. In that instant, I realized that my identity as a soldier was forged not in the approval of family, but in the bonds I cultivated with my fellow service members. They understood me, they fought beside me and stood together against adversity. Whatever trials lay ahead, I could carry on, knowing I had a family forged in honor, respect, and camaraderie. I stepped back, a small smile creeping across my lips, feeling like I'd finally found where I belonged. And as I looked over at the crowd, I felt my father's spirit beside me, whispering that I was indeed his little warrior, even if I had to carve the path on my own. Standing at the front of the room, I struggled to keep my chin up as the sound of my stepmom's laughter echoed in my ears. It had been a week since she dismissed my promotion, reducing my accomplishments to mere military playtime. But in that moment, with the buzzing crowd of fellow soldiers around me, I could almost drown out her words. It was easier when I was focused on the 160 faces looking back at me, faces of my peers, fellow soldiers who had fought alongside me, endured the same long nights and grueling days. There was comfort in our shared struggle, an unspoken bond woven through the fabric of our experiences. I needed to remind myself of that. As I listened to my commanding officer describe my journey to this point, I felt the weight of every challenge, every tear, every moment of self-doubt. It didn't just belong to me, it was ours. I glanced at a few familiar faces in the crowd, Sergeant Thompson, whose laughter had been my lifeline during bleak training days, Private Rodriguez, who had picked me up when I hit my lowest after my first deployment. They believed in me, even when I couldn't quite believe in myself. In that recognition, I felt a flame igniting, the echo of my stepmom's laughter dimming in comparison to the camaraderie surrounding me. "Larissa, you've earned every bit of this recognition," my commander said, his voice steady, resonating with authority. The words washed over me, and I took a deep breath, letting them sink in. It was a moment I had fought hard for, a culmination of sacrifices that had not gone unnoticed. As he spoke, I caught sight of my fellow soldiers leaning forward in their seats, their eyes filled with respect and pride. They weren't just there for me, they were a part of me. In that collective recognition, I felt a surge of confidence I hadn't anticipated. Perhaps this was the validation I needed, the reminder that my worth wasn't contingent upon a family member's approval. Then it happened. My commander turned to the assembly, and with a commanding voice called out, "Attention." Instantly, the room shifted. I watched as every soldier in uniform rose to their feet, standing tall with their backs straight and hands at their sides. "For honor," they yelled in unison, a thunderous call that reverberated through the room, shaking me to my core. It was more than just a chant, it was a declaration, a shared valor that bound us together in that space. At that moment, I was no longer just a staff sergeant, I was part of something far greater, a legacy of dedication, loyalty, and honor. Tears stung the corners of my eyes as I stood at the front, overwhelmed by the profound love and camaraderie swirling around me. In this moment, I had carved a space for myself, not just as a soldier but as a part of a family forged in steel, sweat, and shared experiences. The laughter of my stepmom faded completely into the background, replaced by the unwavering spirit of those who truly understood what it meant to serve. I was cherished, valued, and respected. I was exactly where I belonged. That was the recognition that mattered, the one that made all the sacrifices worthwhile, and the one that I knew would carry me through whatever challenges lay ahead. The echo of my stepmom's laughter still lingered in my ears, a harsh contrast to the pride swelling in my chest just moments earlier. Standing in front of the battalion, I had been engulfed in a wave of camaraderie, my heart racing as I received my promotion. But the moment my mother twisted that joy into ridicule, reducing my accomplishments to a mere, cute little badge, my world flickered with anger, vulnerability, and hurt. It was unexpected, unsettling, and as I watched the faces around me, those of my fellow soldiers, I felt a conflicting sense of belonging and isolation gnawing in my stomach. Now, with the formation of soldiers standing proudly, I could feel the tension in the air, thick like smoke after a drill. I had spent years building this identity, forging bonds and trust, yet that moment with my stepmom pierced through it all. The casual dismissal of who I was and what I fought for ignited a fire within me. How could she, of all people, belittle an achievement born from sweat, sacrifice, and unyielding determination? I could sense the murmurs surrounding me, soldiers exchanging glances, unsure of how to react to my silent struggle against my past while trying to celebrate my present. I took a breath, my palms clammy against the fabric of my uniform, each crease a reminder of the path I had walked to earn my rank. I turned my gaze to the battalion, the sea of faces that represented resilience and strength. The pride I felt in that moment was tangible, but so was the hurt lodged in my throat, a reminder of my family's expectations and constant criticisms. I was no longer the little girl seeking validation, I was a staff sergeant, respected and capable, and I needed to confront the demons that had followed me home. "Excuse me," I croaked, my voice shaky yet determined as I stepped forward. The soldiers shifted their attention to me, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern. "I want to take a moment to acknowledge the work we all put in to get here today." I glanced at the faces before me, feeling an overwhelming sense of unity and strength pulsating through the crowd. This promotion isn't just mine, it belongs to all of you who serve beside me, who have pushed me to be better, who have supported me on and off the field. As I finished, I felt a surge of energy wash over me, a collective roar of support that drowned out the mocking laughter of my stepmom. I raised my hand, and to my surprise, 160 captains stood tall, saluting in unison, their voices reverberating through the air, "For honor." I felt a wave of relief, a sense of belonging that momentarily drowned out my past. This was my family now, bound not by blood but by shared experiences and struggles. No one could diminish what we achieved together, and no amount of mockery could erase the pride I felt in my own skin, at this moment and beyond. The memory of my stepmom's derisive laughter echoed in my ears, mingling with the clamor of the ceremony unfolding just moments before. A staff sergeant? Really, Larissa? You're still playing dress-up, she had sneered, her words laced with the same disdain that had haunted me since childhood. It was a familiar sting, one that threatened to drown out the pride swelling in my chest as I stood before the formation of soldiers. Even now, as I faced the assembled army captains, I couldn't shake off her words. It was as if her mocking echoed through the very fabric of my uniform, a taunt I fought to silence. I took a deep breath, steadying my heart. This was not about her, it was about us, the soldiers who stood together, fighting for something greater than ourselves. Each captain before me had faced their own battles, and in that moment, they were not just officers, they were my comrades. As the commanding officer stepped forward to present me with my promotion, the weight of the moment pressed down on me like the armor I wore in combat. I could feel the stares of the crowd behind me, but I focused on the faces of my fellow soldiers. Their respect bolstered my resolve, forcing back the memories of a childhood marred by a need for validation from those who were supposed to support me. When the moment came, the captain's voice rang out crisply, "For honor." It was a simple phrase, yet it carried the weight of years of service, sacrifice, and resilience. As if choreographed, 160 army captains rose in unison, their postures sharp and their expressions fierce. To see them salute, each one a symbol of sacrifice and commitment, filled me with a sense of belonging I had longed for. It was an unspoken oath that somehow rendered my stepmother's mockery insignificant. They were my family now, bound by shared experiences that stretched far beyond bloodlines. I felt tears stinging my eyes, but I blinked them away, determined not to show any weakness. As the captains stood in salute, the atmosphere shifted. I could sense the collective respect flowing toward me, a tide of honor that swept away the negative energy my stepmom had tried to instill. I could almost hear her voice faltering in disbelief, drowning beneath the roar of applause that erupted from the audience. This was not just my victory, it was our victory. Each clapping hand was a reminder that I had earned my place among them. The years of hard work, the late nights preparing for drills, the grueling physical training, it all coalesced into this singular moment, one that overshadowed every cutting remark my stepmother had ever made. With my heart pounding, I raised my hand in acknowledgement, fighting to keep the tremor of emotion from my voice as I addressed the assembly. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest. "This honor is not just mine, it belongs to every soldier who has shaped me, supported me, and challenged me." I could see the heads nodding, the faces of fellow soldiers lighting up with understanding. They had walked similar roads, faced the same doubts, and yet here we were, united. The camaraderie I felt momentarily drowned out the bitterness I had carried for so long. My stepmom's ridicule was just a distant whisper now. In this moment, surrounded by respect and solidarity, I finally understood what it meant to rise above the shadows of the past. As I stood in front of my fellow soldiers, my heart swelled with a mixture of pride and disbelief. I had spent years proving myself, often feeling the weight of my own worth as I navigated the minefield of skepticism from those who should have supported me the most. My stepmom's smirk echoed in my mind, a reminder of the cruel commentary I had endured throughout my journey. Yet, as I absorbed the sight of 160 respected army captains rising in unison, saluting me with unwavering respect, something inside me shifted. I could no longer hear her voice, I was beyond her reach now. The moment was a climax of sorts, a culmination of all the late nights and early mornings spent pushing my limits. I had worked harder than anyone could imagine, every early dawn run, each grueling training session, and the countless sacrifices I made were finally recognized. The valor and resilience I gathered along the way forged not just a soldier, but a leader. It wasn't the approval of my stepmom or anyone from my past that mattered anymore. It was the honor I earned through my dedication, camaraderie, and the strength I found within myself. Each saluting captain represented a kind of respect that transformed me, cementing my place in this battalion and igniting a fire within me that I wasn't even sure existed. I've learned that the journey to self-acceptance doesn't require validation from voices that seek to diminish your spirit. The disapproval I once feared is now merely a whisper drowned out by the roar of my own empowerment. Each respectful salute was not just an acknowledgement of my rank, but a testament to overcoming not only external obstacles but the internal demons that had whispered doubt for too long. I now choose to surround myself with those who inspire me and lift me up rather than attempt to tear me down. It's liberating to shed the weight of needing approval from those who belittled me, and discovering a resilience that comes from within makes me stronger than any criticism ever could. As I let the moment wash over me, I realized that this was more than just a personal victory. It was a message to every woman who has ever been underestimated. It's a reminder that we can break through barriers, that the strength we possess is often buried under layers of doubt and expectation. I glanced at my fellow soldiers, their faces filled with pride and support, and I felt a kinship that transcended any familial ties I had left behind. I was part of something greater now, a collective of warriors who understood the price of honor and sacrifice. With each salute, I felt a surge of clarity. I had transformed from the girl who sought approval into a woman who commands respect through her actions and choices. The laughter of my stepmom faded into the background as I took center stage in my own life. I walked forward with my head held high, pride swelling in my chest, embodying the very spirit of honor that my fellow soldiers celebrated today. The sun set on the horizon, casting a golden glow on the battlefield behind me, and I realized this was not just the end of a chapter, but the beginning of a legacy, my legacy, a legacy built on honor, resilience, and the undeniable truth that I am enough. If you stayed with me until the end, thank you. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from.